folks. I'm Ellen Malcolm Moore. Welcome to BSOT, also known as the Bitch Slap of Truth. And this is a great place to be if you love pop culture, if you love transformation and spiritual stuff, and if you also love today's digital business thought leader culture. Those are the things we like to talk about that come together. So it seemed like a really good time to talk about this book, Where the Crawdads Sing, because the movie version is recently available on Amazon, I believe. And so it's got people talking about this very, I'm going to say controversial book. Once again, this book by Delia Owen has sold at least 5 million copies, probably some more. It is a book that is loved, very much loved by certain people and very much not loved by others. So let's talk about why. And then there's been a lot of excitement, like did the movie do what the book didn't do? That sort of thing. So let's take a look at how those two things compare. And then finally, should you consume? Should you read this? Do you want to read this? Do you want to reread this? Do you want to watch the movie? And if so, what's good about it? So we'll start with the book itself. I read this a few years ago because it was my sister's favorite book. She absolutely loved it. And my sister is very much a nature lady. She lives in the Big Island of Hawaii, and she's an artist. She has a very special relationship with nature in all its forms, and the animals and the creatures and the sea and all the things. And so I think that's one of the reasons people respond to this book so strongly. The main character, Kaya, I think that's how you say her name, is a little girl who's basically abandoned by various members of her family and eventually her entire family in the swamps of South Carolina, and learns to take care of herself. And I think the thing that touches people about this story very deeply is this story of she's about 6 when she sort of starts to have to manage all of life on her own. And this beautiful place she lives is really her mother, father, nurture. I mean, the swamp is her family. The swamp is the thing she can count on. And so I think what people respond to very strongly is the story of this missing child who's missing her family, who's so little. And the author is, she is a natural sciences expert, and you can really tell. So this is a really incredible book from that place, the descriptions of nature, the relationship of this child to nature. I think all that works really, really well. But there's one problem, which is that in this beautiful story of a child abandoned and kind of operating on her own, people often compare it to Kill a Mockingbird, which is about a similar time. I think it's also really like Island of the Blue Dolphins, if you've ever read that. That was, I think Scott O'Dell was the author, but a young person left alone and sort of growing up in the natural world without much contact with other people. However, to make this book work, there has to be a plot, right? It can't just be about a little girl who's left alone to fend for herself. So there is a plot. And then we get what's sort of this story of nature and a kind of a coming of age story gets also pulled into a murder mystery story. And personally, I mean, it's so what's happening in the book is you're going back and forth between reading the stories of Kaya, trying to make her way in the world, and the beauty of the swamp and her animal and critter friends, and then various attempts to interact with other people. And then you're also in the modern day, there's the story of this trial, and Kaya is actually going to be on trial for the murder of this person. And so, it's that kind of book where these two different plot lines are coming together and you're sort of trying to figure out why. But honestly, what really happens is there's sort of 75% of this that is Kaya in the swamp and boys and, stuff that would happen for a young girl. And it felt to me like this whole murder mystery was sort of a framing device to give it all some oomph. But honestly, I enjoyed the first 2/3 of this book, and the last third, I was just like speeding through the pages. Like, I don't care about this. This doesn't feel authentic. This doesn't feel real. It feels like this was sort of tacked on to give it some structure. And again, when people compare it to Kill a Mockingbird, like, no. To Kill a Mockingbird, the trial that happens in that book is not hey, let's make stuff happen, because otherwise it's just a story about little kids. It is not that at all if you've read that book or seen that movie. That it just couldn't be any further from the truth. Whereas this, to me, felt like we had to sort of have a reason for all this to come together. And so this last third is sort of this murder mystery, and there's this big twist at the end. And what I'll say about that twist is that some people are like, oh my God, I did not see it coming. And other people are like, I saw it coming from page 3. Why are we still talking about this? So we'll have to see. Now, is the movie any better? Watched it the other night with my roommate, and it's beautifully shot. The nature scenes and the videography. Is that how you say that? It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. The main actress, Daisy Edgar Jones, is wonderful. She's just fun to watch. I thought she did a beautiful job with the part. Didn't care for the folks that they chose for the important men, the important boys in Kai's life, but that's just me. Anyhoo, honestly, you know what? People thought, oh, it'll be better because we'll get rid of some of these kind of long descriptive passages and we'll just get right to the meat of the story. And I think what happens when you get right to the meat of the story is you see that the meat of the story, this murder mystery thing, it honestly just isn't that compelling. And there's nothing about it that feels like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Or at least it didn't to me. Now, maybe that's different. If you're watching the movie and you haven't read the book, maybe that's not what's happening. I feel what's strongest about the book are the descriptive, natural phrases and really lyricism about the nature of the swamp. And I think you feel the pain and poignancy of Kaya being left alone. I think that works really well. I think those are somewhat hard things to put on film. So my overall feeling is this a book and movie you can skip? Yes. And if you're a person who loves nature and loves reading about nature, I think you probably enjoy it. If you're a person who's had experience with maybe being alone, maybe being not understood by your family or alienated or left by your family, I think you'd probably find parts of it pretty poignant. And that's what I'm going to say. So that's the bitch slap of truth from me, Ellen Malcolm Moore, on the book and the movie, Where the Crawdads Sing. Someone's like, where do they sing? The answer is nowhere. They sing nowhere. It's an expression that means like, way out there in the wilds. So that's the answer to that mystery.